Jack Chakerian is here today. Jack, thank you so much for being on the show. That's the man right there. He is a writer director. We're going to be talking about Tonight We Dance. And Jack, please intro yourself to the people.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Kostya, for having me. And I'm Jack Chakerian. I'm a filmmaker here in Seattle, Washington for the moment, but I was actually living in Spain, in Barcelona, a few years ago, and I made three short films when I was there. And the last one of those three is called Tonight We Dance, Esta Noche Bailamos. Yeah, I
Tell
mean,
me,
in a
yeah.
nutshell, I'm assuming, yeah, so like the nutshell is these three people, three friends who break into this building kind of semi-drunkenly break into this building, and then they find this glowing egg that turns them against each other. And that's the nutshell premise, kind of a psychological horror in a way. And we shot it over 5 nights in this ancient textile factory in Catalonia. So it was very fun.
Yeah, it looked like it was a fun project. It's a cool location, production value is really nice. And for people who haven't seen it, I would say that that's a great summary. These three kids, 20 somethings, they're a couple of them are more drunk than another. One guy might be sober. They go in, and there's like this existing relationship milieu. Like there's one girl, two guys. They're kind of rivalry over this girl. One guy's like, no, she's yours. This guy is ready to profess his love for her. So one guy is painted as very earnest and kind of like a hero character in terms of that. And another guy is more like not a reputable character, one to be trusted. He lies to his friend, betrays him multiple times. The girl is questionable. She's certainly not sincere in any of her relationships, um, and so they have this evening where they go out for kicks and break into a building, and here they discover this kind of sci-fi object, whatever it might be. Um, and it kind of gets into their heads, right? And it kind of speaks their thoughts. It seems to create more adversity or rivalry or contention, anger, and kind of feeds on their anger and the bloodshed, and it grows with that, and it kind of likes to elicit that. So on the one hand, we've got this story that's like on a superficial level, is like very like, okay, 20 somethings, they're like, sex kind of focus, the hormones are raging, everybody wants to get with everybody else, and there's that aspect of it. And then there's the truth and the honesty and the friendship and the trust, and there's that. And then there's kind of a deeper layer. There's, to me, there's this level of kind of control, freedom, which now starts to create a more transcendent story in my eyes, where like it's no longer about like this kind of threesome who gets the girl, like, these emotionality of youth. It kind of becomes into a broader context of desire, and the desire being a power system that controls us. And the reason I'm kind of riffing on that point, A, it's a little more it's universal, right? It's, transcendent from age and genre and category and sexuality. And then and then you have this line in there. You have this line that says, it's that thing. It's gotten into my head. It isn't me. It isn't me. So when we start throwing that out there, now we're talking about identification and how we see ourselves and what we identify with ourselves. And here we are as humans and humanity, and we've got this lustful, vengeful, sexual control, dominant. We have these destructive forces that live within us, and they're so visible. I have a 6-year-old, and I've raised her for the last several years, and you can just see the forces of those things just from this mash of clay just being there, and having to socialize those forces as a parent. Now, there's a prior step of having to parent ourselves, right? And having to socialize and contain our own emotionality. So here I've dumped it all on you, Jack. The first question is the narrative and themes. If you relate to these narrative and themes that I've outlined, please tell me otherwise. And if you do, wherever they are, where have they come from your own life context?
Okay. Wow. I love hearing how you interpreted all that. It's so fun to listen to. Um, I really, how do I even begin? I, I think when I was writing this way back, before even shooting it, I did have a bit of fear that, also as I was kind of workshopping the idea, I had this fear that, yeah, people are just going to see it as like toxic masculinity. People just kind of just like, yeah, two guys fighting over a girl. I really like all of these deep insights you have, and everyone has a different interpretation. I tend to have a certain like, I guess, anti-theme, anti-message bent to myself, where like, I don't want to compress the experience of the film into just like a one-liner, like a takeaway in a kind of conceptual sense. But what you asked about where it came kind of from your own experience, that I can kind of speak to, I guess. Because I was in Barcelona at the time, and I would say like the way I relate to this film when I watch it now is different than how I relate to it back when I was making it. Very different, kind of significantly different. But I remember at the time, like, I was really like my friends and I would go out at night into the Barcelona nightlife. And it's kind of like the later that the night gets, the more that it seems like people's human masks come off. And there's this underneath this human mask is this kind of animal nature in people. And I don't say that in like a bitter or misanthropic way, more like, I like animals. It's like there's an aggressive and maybe toxic side, but there's also this freedom. I think you mentioned something about freedom and there's something about, expression and fun and all of this too. So I think if we resist that too much, it can actually also be unhealthy. So in this film, it's like you have this guy, Mark, who begins kind of seemingly maybe reasonable or respectful of his friends, but then when they don't act in the way he would prefer them to act, right, the way he expects reality to be, then of course he suffers because when you resist reality, you suffer. And then towards the end, though, he accepts reality as it is. He accepts who he is and who other people are. And, he dances at the very end. So I hate to say it in a way it sounds almost too thematic, but I feel like that experience of moving towards freedom or something like that is notable. And but I mainly I want to mention that background of being in Barcelona.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that, all these ideas that are written and the narrative and the structure of the narrative, and it creates this arc, and it's a journey into understanding ourselves. And so there is meaning. There is meaning, and we are capturing meaning, and we are relating and conveying meaning. And the way we understand the meaning changes based on how we change, right, over time. And so I think what you mentioned about reality and accepting reality is a really important layer that gets us into the next sort of piece, which is what is the takeaway? And I think, with regards to the theme of that I kind of touched on and highlighted in terms of identity and what are we identifying with? I think this acceptance of reality is still um, wedded to that from the perspective of like, how do we want to experience ourselves? Who do we want to be,
Mhm.
ultimately? And so the character in the movie makes a choice to experience himself um, in this liberated way. And, you worked it into, your own relationship with the movie as this acceptance of the powers that he cannot control. And how do you see that? And you've also mentioned with, going out partying and seeing the dual sides of mankind. How do you understand, through the lens of this movie, reflecting on it now, from where the perspective of where you are now, who you want to be, the kind of person that you want to be? how do you relate to the film and the meaning that it's giving you? You know, what do you carry away from the movie?
Yeah, yeah, okay. Again, I don't want to enforce interpretation for anyone
No,
else who would watch the film.
we're disclaiming that.
Yeah, but I always have to preface it, take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'd say, back when I made it, I think I made it more in the impulsive, aggressive kind of spirit of also how the characters were in the film. There's a bit of that in myself, and I kind of like that the film can preserve that time, in a filmic way. But now when I see it, I think it's easy to villainize these people, and it's also easy for the characters to villainize each other. But really, nobody's entitled to other people acting a certain way. The only thing we're entitled to is the relationship we choose to have with our own experience. So, this is Mark towards the end. He again accepts who he is, who other people are, and different things will happen in life. We'll feel happy, defeated, confused, sad, happy again. And all we can really do is accept the roller coaster of fortune and emotions that happen.
Yeah. And it's a very, healthy attitude, I think, as we are all, whether, humans first and foremost, artists, filmmakers, creative people, whatever, everybody is in that boat in one way or another. As we mature, I think there's that natural transition and natural age that you've captured in the film where, you know, our own sense of justice and right or wrong, that may be a value system that is healthy, is not one that we can impose or expect from others. Our choice is to say, well, do we accept others' actions? Do we want to continue our relationships with them or not? Or do we choose not to? So I think that's, one formative thing that you're talking about in terms of our own evolution as people. And it's a healthy place to be in terms of this idea of what we have ultimate control over, which is only ourselves. It sounds like that's what you're saying is your kind of growth point from the movie. That's really your takeaway is that
I don't know. I mean, what's my takeaway or what's my growth point? I don't know. Whenever I hear myself speaking in thematic terms about my own movies, I feel like it's so, I don't want to say lowbrow, but like, I don't know, the experience of a film is so it can be like film cinema can be experienced, directly. But then when you talk about that experience, secondhand, then it kind of dilutes it. So I sometimes, I don't know, I hear
I
myself speaking in terms
I
of messages.
you're not the only one, but I mean, in terms of feeling that way. But I want to encourage to like a shift in the mindset from like, rather than thematic kind of things, we're just taking like the narrative of a film as a jumping point for our own lives, right? What's more
Mm.
important than films is our lives. Like film, whatever, art, whatever, books, great. But they should shape and inform our own experience. So here you are the subject matter. You're the art. You're the real art, in my eyes. And in my eyes, how has that art that you produce shaped you? How has it changed your vision?
I like the question, but I don't I don't fully understand it. Yeah, film is very indirect, right? It's really our own lives in the end that matter. I like this.
How
Could
has the
you
movie changed you? Like, how have you been informed by the movie? Like, there's always a cathartic process as a filmmaker, as an artist, or whatever. Like, when you create something, you're healing something. That's my belief. It seems
Mm.
to be true after, I've talked to a lot of people, and they seem to always have this. Like, if you're making shit, it should be, at the very least, helping you understand yourself in the world better.
Okay, I would agree. I think for me, and this is a kind of a really, it might sound oversimplistic, but some things that were parallel to these characters and my own life at the time. I didn't discover some glowing egg in a in a building, but there were some similar social dynamics and similar kind of psychological shifts. And I feel like just the act of expressing oneself and like making whatever is true to you manifest that in an audiovisual way on the screen, I feel like that alone can be healing because by doing that, by taking some truth in your own life and making it evident, it's a way of accepting. what happens in your own life. And again, kind of back to what we were saying, when you accept reality as it is, you don't resist it and you don't suffer as much. And I feel like that happens for probably every filmmaker and for every film that they make. I think that's kind of the key of the process a little bit.
That's awesome. And so that accepting, like in terms of the dynamic forces in the world, love and hate, right? Ultimately, what and your and the idea of acceptance, how do you live your own life with that duality in you
With the
of
duality of you're
love and
saying love
hate?
and hate.
Yeah. Yeah, your capacity to destroy. So your the
Hmm.
Thantos and Eros, the desire to destroy, the desire to create. How do you manage those emotions?
I guess what I would say to that is, first off, I try to accept these emotions that they come about, whether it's love or it's hate or, it's a desire. I hope I don't have too much desire to destroy in my life, but any kind of thing that comes up will come up eventually. For me, what's useful is to find a kind of beauty in whatever those emotions are. Even feeling, my friend told me the other day something about like that he was feeling lonely, and I responded like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Unless you enjoy feeling lonely." And he was like, "Who would want to feel lonely?" But I feel like any emotion that comes, again, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, you can also find something. I don't want to say beauty because then it might make you think, well, we should romanticize our suffering, which I don't think is a good thing to do necessarily. But I do think there's a way you can appreciate just about any experience that comes about if you give some effort to doing so.
I love that, Jack. Thank you. I mean, the way I understand that is not romanticizing. I think that's like it's an egoic driven state, but a place of compassion, where you can find compassion for yourself, for others, the suffering that humanity goes through. There's beauty in that.
Mm.
Jack Chakerian, filmmaker, writer, director.
Well, I've really enjoyed this. I hope you did too.
I
It's always
did.
interesting talking about one's own film after some time. I feel like a lot of filmmakers watch your channel, so, make what your heart most wants to make and be patient and work hard and finish what you start.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for your boldness, Jack. Thank you for your truth. And thank you for sharing your vision and your thoughts and your heart. We're out. Play it forward.